All right, welcome. Welcome back to the collision repair and refinishing stage, brought to you by iCar and SCRS. This is a great day. It's the final day. We're all here. We made it this far here. And, I just want to thank everyone for joining me today. My name is Danny Gredenberg. I'm with the Database Enhancement Gateway, and we have some great panelists here today. So let's go ahead and introduce yourselves.
My name is Justin Lewis. I'm a board member on SCRS.
I am Andrew Battenhorst. I am the secretary for SCRS.
And Bud Center, Director of Technical Products and Curriculum at iCar.
Well, I just want to thank you gentlemen here for joining me today because, the topic that I just can't get off the mind, right? I just attended a couple of sessions here this week, and yesterday was a great OEM summit that we had from SCRS, and, we had some great conversations about safety inspections. I can't help but think we got to continue this on, because like I said, we had limited time over there, and there were some great topics that we were, listening and hearing from shop owners, from Mike Anderson, Collision Advice, and I think this is something really important to the industry that we really need to, take charge of and really, understand more about the details when it comes down to doing safety inspections and some challenges, right? Talk through those things. So, I really want to talk about, obviously, there's a big disconnect and understanding between repairs and the insurers, even the consumers, right? What do we need to do when it comes down to doing a safe and proper repair? So I want to turn this over to Justin. When a consumer comes to you, and they're after an accident, they're obviously in a stressful situation. What are some of the conversations that you're having with that consumer about their vehicle? Is it going straight to the dent, or are you thinking about something else?
Typically, we'll start off talking about what the repair looks like, but one of the most important questions we'll ask our customers is safety important to you? Because what it comes down to with these post-collision inspections really is how safe is that vehicle going to be when the repairs are done. I can tell you that 100% of every one of my customers tells me that safety is very important to them, and the only way for us to provide a safe repair is to follow the manufacturer's instructions on post-collision repair inspection that goes down and restores that safety by checking every safety component in that vehicle.
So safety is obviously an important thing. The consumer buys a car based on what? Safety features about the car. It's a pretty big investment, right? So then I'm going to kick it over to Bud because, Bud, you have done, your team at iCar really looks at this process, right? And because you guys also understand that there's some, things in the repair manual that may be a barrier, or maybe there's some challenges of, performing these inspections. What is iCar doing when it comes down to providing this information or helping assist with the information?
Sure. So there's a number of things that we are doing to help. And I'll kind of step backwards a little bit. I think all of this really starts with repairers and understanding where to find the information, because I do a lot of presentations on this topic, and I hear repairers all the time that think that this information is going to be within an actual repair procedure, when in reality it's typically found in the general procedures for that manufacturer. It's not going to be in there with the repair. So they need to start looking for the information in those places. But as far as help, what are we doing? We've got a few things. If you go to the Repairability Technical Support site, RTS, you've got a link for SRS inspections that you can go to, and you can search by year, make, model, and it will give you the things that manufacturer says following an airbag deployment, you need to do these things, and that type of information's there. Because they're copyrighted, we can't give you the repair procedures, but we can give you some information and kind of guide you and then send you back to the OEM information to find it. And then for anybody who's struggling with one of these post-collision safety inspections, don't understand what to do or how to find the information, whatever it is, you can submit a question through Ask iCar. And I believe the cycle time on that is still under 2 hours to get a response from that team. So they're really fast at getting back to you with the help that you need. And then if you're just having challenges overall with the post-collision safety inspections, there's a link on there where you can submit your questions, the information you've got, photos showing what you found, and we're using that to help us go back and continue the conversations with vehicle makers about what can we do to make the information that's in there more specific, more direct, easier to understand, because there's so many times when it'll say something like, following a collision where the damage is more than cosmetic damage, but there's no definition of what is cosmetic damage. So it's making, how do we figure out what's causing the friction and fix it?
So you bring up a great point there. You know, a repairer can submit a question and get clarity on it. Now, I think Andrew and Justin, as a repairer, you may have encountered doing an inspection, or maybe you read some documents from one manufacturer. You do that inspection, right? And then you get another car that comes to your shop, and you go straight to the inspection, and then the language may be not there or missing, but you just recalled working on something nearly identical to that, right? You have some similarities of safety systems, right? You have airbags maybe made from same suppliers, but one manufacturer calls it out, one doesn't. What are some of the things that you've seen out there? I'll start with you, Andrew.
I mean, it's all over the place sometimes, and it's very challenging. For us, having a culture of consistency has really been crucial in making sure that we're not just looking at a superficial level of what we think might be the answer, and really going and exhausting everything that we have available to us so that we were making the right decisions about the inspections that we have to perform. Because if you don't do that, there is the risk that you aren't looking at something that you need to look at. And that could be a big problem later on down the road after that car is gone.
Okay. So, and just for the people in the audience, when we're talking about a safety inspection, I just want to make sure we clarify things like steering columns, right? Airbags, seat belts, connectors. I mean, what else are we thinking about in the process of Bud?
So there's really a ton of things that you're looking at. You're looking at all of your ADAS sensors, your SRS deployment sensors, all of your connectors. You're looking at airbags. You're looking at the backside of airbags. You're looking at crossbars behind the instrument panel. I mean, there's so many things that you're looking at, and it's, every time I start to think, well, maybe some of these inspections are just a little bit too intrusive or having to do too much, we'll see an example where somebody had a very minor impact, but then they find a damaged reinforcement bar behind the instrument panel, and you go, that's why they want us doing this stuff.
Yeah. Collision repairs are pretty good at looking for things, right? I mean, I think that's their job, is to look for damage, right? And then you may have some, scenarios where you're like, you know what, I'm going to get another opinion. Maybe I'll call a dealership, because they obviously work on that brand of car quite often. And let's see what they say, right? And what's, are they pretty open to these things, Justin, when you call the dealership in your market and say, you know what, hey, I need to do a safety inspection? Are they open to it, or do they understand it? Are they able to help you?
It really depends on the dealer. I've personally had to go to one of our local dealers because we had a bill payer reach out to them and ask about safety inspections, and they were told they'd never heard of it. So we went through and had a meeting with the service advisors there and went through their own OEM technical pages and showed them requirements after a collision, just because that particular dealership wasn't familiar with that. So we wanted to make sure to educate them so that they could help also educate their customers. We could help support what we need to do as well.
So can a dealer be, use your services, through iCar, Bud?
Absolutely. Anybody can log into the RTS site. It's not behind the login. There's no, fees or anything. It's open to anybody that wants to go in there. And I was doing a panel discussion on this topic at Reuters Automotive USA a week ago. And I think I brought this up yesterday in the panel as well, but when you think about the vehicles that are on the road, who sees it first? It's sure not the dealer. First time it's damaged, it's not the dealer that's seeing this. So all of these things that the collision repairers are doing for the first time, it's not surprising that somebody in the service department at a dealer didn't know it needed to be done. I think some of the other confusion could be that in the manuals, they don't call it post-collision safety inspection. They're just, these are the things you need to inspect following a collision.
Yep. So what about tooling requirements? I mean, do the dealerships have the tools, and maybe are they not aware of it? I mean, what's your experience with that, Andrew?
It's just a general lack of awareness, period. I have found that what they interpret to be a safety inspection is more in line with like a used car vehicle inspection, where a 120 or 90-point inspection that a vehicle's coming in for, just as a method of upselling maybe additional mechanical services for a car, not necessarily like what we've been talking about with what's required after a collision or a more thorough safety inspection. And in my case, I like Justin, have had to bring documentation with me to affirm that, hey, this is what the service manual is requiring to be done. And a lot of times they're not comfortable doing that because we may be the only shop in that market that's bringing that to their attention. So it's a lot of lack of awareness.
One of the things yesterday during Mike Anderson's presentation that might speak to this a little bit, was the vehicle that had been in an impact where the seatbelt mounting point on the B pillar was bent. Something you wouldn't typically look for on a front-end collision without going through the safety precautions, through the procedures to see what you're looking for to make sure that even the mounting point for the seatbelt, that I believe, if I remember correctly, the seatbelt didn't show damage, but the mounting point for the seatbelt was bent in the B pillar, which obviously puts a massive, massive opportunity for something to happen later on.
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up a good point there about checking the mounting points. I was just in a shop in Denver, and they had a newer Toyota vehicle. The vehicle had a deployment on the side curtain airbag, and what was interesting was looking at the mounting point. It actually had distorted the mounting surfaces of that inner roof rail, and it was one of those things because you think about it, if you not inspected that part up front, and you had waited till the very end to, during the reassembly portion, you'd missed that damage there. And it's almost a frightening thing to think, like, what would have happened at that point? The car's all done, you're going through your final reassembly, and then you discover that damage, and now you're thinking about a complete redo of that vehicle's repair needs.
Or it's a total loss, right?
And that's the other scary part. And then that shop, what was interesting, what was also pretty cool, I would say, is the procedure clearly states this area cannot be repaired. And I'm thinking, how many hammers touch that area, just to get it back and set it in the right place? And that's a scary thought right there. Would it perform the same? I mean, Bud.
No, 100%. It would not. It would absolutely not. There's a reason why they tell you that you can't repair that.
So that goes back to the stress, the integrity of the structure. Checking welds. Right. Even though when we do work on that car, making sure that those areas are always going to be in the right position. Now, I'm going to take a little thing, back to the culture of the shop. I want to, because we come here, we learn about safety inspections, like, do this, you got to do it, right? And we get excited about it. How do we jump into it? Is it something that you just want to jump in all 100%, or is it going to require some sort of buy-in from your team?
I think it absolutely has to be co-developed with them, side by side, designing what it's going to look like. What are all the steps that the team is going to agree to do, where you have reference material back to what, the work mix that you have in your shop, right? If you specialize in certain brands and that's your lane that you operate in, your processes should be probably dovetailed into what that manufacturer is going to be having you do all the time. And then at that point, there has to be a system of accountability, because without someone to reinforce that all these steps that were agreed upon are going to be done, it's just going to turn into a poster that hangs on the wall that nobody really pays attention to.
Yeah, but at the same time, and I agree with everything that Andrew said, but it's not something that you can just slow roll into and do it eventually. I mean, if you think about this, the liability, the exposure that you have on every vehicle you repair when you're not doing these inspections, I mean, think about it for a minute, right? We all know, at least one person that is a former multi-shop owner that is no longer in this business because of one of these post-collision safety inspections that were not performed.
Right.
I think for our standpoint, it's the culture at your shop that determines how quickly this stuff gets put into place.
Well said.
If you have a team of people working for you or that you work with that is 100% focused on customer safety, customer satisfaction, doing the right thing, I think it can roll out a lot quicker. But like to Bud's point, it's not a slow roll, step by step, get it going. It's an all or nothing, because you can't fix just one part of a safety component and then maybe on the next one fix two parts of it. It's got to be every part. It can't be just one rollout. So it's got to be everything, 100%.
And that's a great point there, because, like I said, it can be pretty scary to think, you get a document here that says you got to strip down the whole interior of the car, and then all of a sudden it's like, for why? What was the reason? All we're doing is just maybe some bumper reinforcement, maybe a core support damage, right? And all of a sudden we're stripping down the whole interior, and that may seem like pretty invasive. And again, it's really important that I think that the buy-in gets done up front with the team.
Yeah. Anytime shops will tell me that, they'll say, well, it's too invasive. I'm not sure that we need to do it. I always point back to who manufactured the vehicle, and then understanding the fact that they've built these vehicles now so that passenger compartment, is so safe, so structurally sound. But do we know every area in the vehicle that they've designed to collapse to be that, that structural point that it gives so that it stays safe in the passenger compartment, we don't know. That's why they want us looking at all these things.
Yeah. Have you ever had, I mean, has iCar ever had any conversations with the actual supplier of these safety systems, beyond the manufacturer? Has there ever been any conversations as far as why one specific model may have an inspection but the other one may not?
I'm not aware of any models that don't have inspections, honestly. Of course, we have those conversations with each of the manufacturers. We talk to the people that build, the different components that are part of the safety systems. But most of what you're looking at is structure, and that goes right back to the vehicle manufacturer. I mean, you're looking at airbags and things like that, components. But the reason you're stripping it all down is to look at the structure of the vehicle and make sure everything's safe.
I think it's hard with that topic because every OEM wants to tout that their car is the safest, right? And that they're the leader in safety technology. But on the flip side of that, you have maybe, 3 to 4 manufacturers of airbag components, and then the interpretation of what inspection is required for each of those manufacturers then starts to differ based on their legal team and all the other engineers that are involved with those decisions to write that out. And then we, as the end user of those instructions, are left to kind of pick up those pieces and then give that to the bill payer for reimbursement.
Yeah.
And that's what leads to a lot of the frustration that came up in yesterday's conversation about all this. So it's a big challenge.
So, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's extremely difficult, like to your point, where you've got 3 or 4 different manufacturers, but every OEM has somewhat variation that's a little bit different on how to get that done. So when you do a safety inspection on one OEM, it may have different verbiage for the essentially same component for another one. So it can be extremely difficult trying to know what needs to be done, but also working with the bill payer to understand that it's the same component, the same process needs to be done. It might just be written differently.
Right. And sorry, one more thing,
All right,
Danny.
go ahead.
I just want, and then Mike brought up a really great point yesterday is the percentage of shops that are actually doing the inspections. And if the bill payers are not hearing a consistent message from all of us and asking to do these things, of course, we're going to be the black sheep if there's only 5% or whatever, 3% of the shop in a given market that's actually asking for it, doing it, and documenting it and proving that it was done.
Sounds similar to that challenge we've got where we have that database that we're trying to collect the information from the industry. And in about 6 years, we've had 96 submissions.
Yeah.
We need help there. We need as much information as we can get on that.
Seems like I hear there's more pushback on on doing the inspection than there is of people actually submitting concerns or the what their findings are, right?
Yep.
So
100%, yes.
So again, that goes back to how many times should you find something before you're convinced that this needs to be done? I mean, is it something like it's just a one-off scenario that this could happen, or is it happening more and more? And should it just take one time to find something to say I'm convinced?
Yep. So there's a shop owner in the audience. I won't give any names here, but he heard me present on this not too long ago, and was it caught his attention, and then went back and started doing some inspections on vehicles and found something almost immediately on one of the vehicles that they were inspecting. So it's serious stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So, the other thing is, you get a consumer that may say, you know what, this car, I just bought it, there should be no issues with it. There's no history about the car. But then we hear, cars maybe slipping through the channels and maybe getting fixed, and then you never see a report on it, or maybe there's something that everything looks like it's done right. But then you find a little resistor in there to trick the airbag computer or to trick the light from activating. Does that happen? Have you seen that in your shops, or is that something to be concerned about?
Yeah, we had a car that was in an accident. It was a BMW that went to our service department that had a significant amount of suspension damage, and for some reason the steering gear was not replaced at that time. And I don't know the full backstory, but about a year went by, and the customer started getting some weird notchiness in the steering and some issues with the drivetrain malfunction light coming on. So they didn't really correlate the two things together, just thought this must be some new problem with my car. Took it back to service and got me involved from the collision center to kind of help with the insurance process. And the car actually needed a new steering gear and a new steering column. And with the additional costs that went back into doing that, plus some other items that we noticed were missed, it ended up totaling the car. So that car was being driven on the road for almost a year in that kind of condition.
Justin, anything that you've noticed in your market?
Not in particular of vehicles that hadn't been wrecked that we knew about.
Yeah.
We're not a dealership shop, but excuse me, I've had vehicles that have come in with very minor impacts, being rear-ended, that we've had tooth and nail fights with bill payers about the inspections, because it would say after a collision, any collision, it has to be done. And lo and behold, we pulled a steering column out that was actually collapsed from a very minor rear end impact, which validated the necessity of needing to do it, because had we followed suit and just capitulated to, well, I guess it's a minor hit, we'll just make the call here, our customer would have been down the road with a vehicle that was not safe.
Okay. So as we wrap things up here, I just want to ask, ask you a final thought question. If there's one thing that you can, ask an OEM or ask a group of OEMs, in front of you about the safety inspections, what would be the question that you would want them to address for you? What sits on your mind that you'd want to ask the OEMs to help you do in terms of safety inspections, and what would it be?
I would say, from a proceduring standpoint, making extremely easy for a body shop to research and understand what's required for the calibrations, for post-collision inspections. Make the information really easy to find. Sometimes you have to dive into owner's manuals to find information about seatbelts, right? Not every shop, I can guarantee, most shops probably, aren't pulling owner manuals out of glove boxes to look up seatbelt information. So having a place that's very easy to centralize what is required, how to keep your customer safe when something does happen, would be a huge, huge win.
I agree with all of that. And my response would maybe be a little bit more pie in the sky. I don't know how realistic it would be, but some type of standardization amongst OEMs where there could be a universal agreement of these are the main things that need to be checked, similar to how we have OBD2 as a information standard for vehicle data, and you have orange high voltage cables that everybody has agreed upon and stuff like that. If there was some way that could be introduced into our space, I think that would greatly help with having parity for everyone.
Okay. Bud, anything?
Well, you make it tough to follow the guys that just said all the things that make the most sense. But I agree with everything they just said. If we can find some way to make it easier to find the information, I think that the inspecting the same things and having some general things, you can do some of that. I think that based on the vehicle design and structure, it's going to react differently, so it's not always going to be the same. But one of the things I wanted to bring up, we talked yesterday with Mike about the new Volvo seatbelt system. Incredible system, right? Everybody agrees with that. When I first saw this months ago, the first thing I thought is, what do we have to be looking for to start to think about? This is now a seatbelt system that's going to react, I think I saw 11 different ways, depending on the size of the driver, the weight of the driver, the angle of the collision, severity of the collision, and it's all going to impact the way that the seatbelt system reacts. So how is that going to impact the collision is the first thing that came into my head. How is it going to affect the repairer?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Well, these are all great things. With that, I want to give a shameless plug to the DEG, because we put together all the websites for the owner's manuals on the available on the estimator's toolbox there. And then again, I just want to thank you for your time, gentlemen, today. So again, thank you for joining us here at the collision repair refinishing stage. And then we'll see you on the next one, and keep doing those safety inspections. Don't let that be a contention of not doing it for the customer. You want to focus on that customer for number one. So thank you.
Thanks, Danny.
Thanks, Danny.